present Distributech 2023, one of the sponsors of these interviews. And these are interviews with thought leaders from around North America and the globe. Our sponsors are H2 Scan. H2 Scan is the leading sensor manufacturer for hydrogen sensing in a lot of different applications, in transformers, in battery room safety, in processes and safety, in industrial, and in the future hydrogen economy. So I want to thank our sponsors, and I want to thank all of our guests, and I hope you enjoy this interview. My next guest is Dan Roth. Dan is the head of sales and marketing for Dynamic Ratings, a company at APC Media that we know and love. But Dan, thank you for joining me. Appreciate it. So tell me a little bit about how you got in the industry and a little bit about Dynamic Ratings.
Yeah, I've been in the industry for 20 years. So I got
Dan, you can't have been in 20 years. You're not that old. What did you start when you were 15?
No, but electrical engineering degree with a concentration in power. My first job out of school was with SEL doing protective relaying. From there, I moved to Cooper Power, and ultimately Eaton acquired Cooper Power Systems several years ago. Started to take different roles within the utility industry, a lot on the distribution side. 2 years ago, I moved over to more of the back to the substation and transmission side of the business when I joined Dynamic Ratings. And that company is really focused on asset management and monitoring of large apparatus like circuit breakers and power transformers.
Okay. We're going to talk more about that, about Dynamic Ratings in a bit. But last year at IEEE PEST&D and at Renewable Energy Plus, when we asked people what are the issues that people in the utility industry are dealing with, number one, supply chain issues. Obviously, we're coming out of COVID. Number two, labor shortages and can't hire the people that you need to hire. So again, not a surprise. We're going to talk about those and some of the things because they have not gone away. We're mitigating the supply chain issues, just mitigating them. But I don't think supply chain issues are going to go away for a long time, because now we've also got, because of geopolitical risk, because of other things, we're bringing more supply back here, and as a result of it, in North America, supply chain issues have gotten exacerbated. So we haven't solved it, we've just made it worse. And then labor issues are going to be with us for another whole decade or two. So we'll get to them. You just, because there are other issues that the industry is dealing with right now. The biggest one, I think, is the expectation of how rapidly we can decarbonize. We take on DER, that we take on the wind and the solar. We adopt and adapt the grid to this whole EV charging thing that's happening. Bloomberg just announced that their first projections, their last projections on the adoption of EVs was 2.6 times off. They said, we missed it because it's happening a lot faster than we thought. Well, that means you got to have more infrastructure. It's not just power, you got to have the infrastructure. So there's a lot of other change taking place, demands on the utility, right? So go back to where we've got supply chain issues, we've got labor issues, now we've got expectation issues. Talk about that.
Yeah, so you have regulatory drivers that are pushing a lot of those. And so you're starting to see a change in energy policy, which you talked about with the drive of renewables. And then you're also seeing the decarbonization part of it, which is the electric vehicles. And so that's pushing utilities to try and do more with the grid and try and meet these projections. So they're on typically 10-year planning cycles. And so when they're looking out 10 years, they're trying to get a grasp of where they're going to start to exceed the ratings of their equipment and what they could do about it. The challenge they have starts bringing in the two constraints you brought up earlier, where they have supply chain issues. So how are they going to get the equipment that they need in a timely fashion because of the long lead times that still exist on components and the unpredictability of supply chain? It's a little bit of a revolving wheel in the sense that, when one area gets fixed, now something else pops up. And so maybe something that wasn't a problem last year now becomes a problem this year. And so that becomes an area of uncertainty and hard to plan around and manage. And then the other piece of it you talked about is the labor shortages. So we see that very commonly where they're trying to run projects and they just don't have people, or they may have people but they don't have the experience necessary to navigate through all those other challenges that they're trying to deal with. So those are still very real challenges that they're dealing with to meet these regulatory requirements, which ultimately result in increased demand on the grid.
Right. Whack-a-mole. Remember that game?
Yes.
That's what it is, whack-a-mole. You think you've solved the problem, but you haven't solved the problem. How's Dynamic Ratings dealing with because you all are a growing company, how are you dealing with the labor shortage?
So we've actually done pretty well from a staffing standpoint, and so we're not dealing with it directly ourselves within our own organization, but we are seeing it outward when we're dealing with our customer base. So we have several customers who are trying to deploy very large-scale asset management programs. So they're trying to reach out to multiple sites, hundreds of transformers and high-voltage circuit breakers, and they're trying to bring those back into a monitoring program in the next 2 to 3 years. And the challenge they have is just navigating their own organizational structures, but then also really having an understanding of what's out in the field, because a lot of times there's inexperienced people put into very critical roles that have to provide direction for that program, and they're relying more and more on us to provide our experience based on projects we've done in the past to kind of pass along the lessons learned and what they should be avoiding as pitfalls that are common.
So if you're a good trusted advisor, that means a lot for Dynamic Ratings. It also puts more risk because they're asking you to make decisions because they either don't know how or are afraid to because they don't know how, they haven't done it before. It puts a lot of pressure on Dynamic Ratings to help them make the right decisions. How do you do that?
Well, I think we have several individuals who have been through these battles before. So we have several people that have 20 years of utility experience. So they've lived that life. They know the challenges that our customers are dealing with, and they work within our organization to provide that experience to everyone else and provide guidance. And we've done enough of these programs as a market leader in asset management that we feel confident in the direction we give them. And usually we're not telling them it's one way to do it, but really it's more of a discussion about what their priorities are and really being focused on their objectives. So what we're trying to avoid is boiling the ocean. You have to understand when you're implementing asset management and real-time condition-based monitoring, it's a change in culture within the utility. And so you have to be able to set the right expectations, and you have to be clear what you're trying to do, so that way you're not making too much change at once. Because if you make too much change at once, that's when you're going to get pushback, and that's going to really slow down the project and cause it to stall out, which is counterproductive what they're trying to achieve. So really trying to provide guidance of stay focused, what is most critical to you? Are you really trying to reduce your maintenance? Are you trying to do risk mitigation? Are you trying to just bring back the data for better planning purposes? Or is it a combination of all three? And then that really dictates what are some of the other decisions you need to make from service support, architecture, what kind of sensing that you need to invest in out in the field. Should we be doing breakers first? Should we be doing transformers first? Do you need software tools to help supplement the monitors in the field? Those are all important decisions that will dictate the success of the program.
So all of that, you've got to accomplish all of that when you're talking about a utility. That's a lot. Coupled with the fact that you don't have as skilled a workforce as you've had, so you got to have, somebody's got to decide which way to go first, right? When you get to that kind of a large-scale asset management program, given that many of those assets, transformers in particular, the lead time on transformers now is out for all transformers. I mean, it's not like, oh yeah, we can get them in 6 months. If the 6-month transformer is now 2 years. And it doesn't seem to be getting any better because the demand is increasing. There's a chip manufacturer in Taiwan that is building a factory in Arizona. They need $300 million worth of transformers. Well, that sucks even more transformers out of the market for the maintenance of it. So obviously, utilities have to figure out how to maintain their installed base longer than they normally had thought about it, because they did age-related planning. Hey, we got this many old transformers, but they can't do that anymore. Right. So they got to go to condition-based monitoring and do that. Talk a little bit about how you help them do that.
I think you're exactly right, because the design criteria and the safety margins that went into transformer designs from 50 years ago is different than the ones that are 20 years ago and then even today. So the efficiency ratings of transformers have changed. That all impacts, I think, the life of that transformer. The transformer OEMs are doing a good job trying to respond to this demand. So there are some OEMs that are opening new plants to increase North America production of transformers. So there is a market response and an industry response to that demand. The way that we play into that is, by providing data. And so with better data, they can make more informed decisions, and they can really say, is there arcing? Are we developing gases within that transformer? Is that a better candidate to replace than one just simply because of where its born on date was?
Yeah, and one of the problems is now load. If you plug in a community and you've got a lot of EV charging at night, right? That's when they want you to charge your EV. But to charge an EV from all the way, from 0 to up, is the same as running a house during the daytime. It takes a lot of load. Now, if you're at 80% and you're charging up 20%, that's not a big deal. But there's more and more of a demand, and so that peak load is now peak load longer. It seems like they're running more transformers at peak load. We were talking to somebody that's running it. I think they said that during the one period of time they were running it like 126% of load, and then up to 212%. That you're just destroying that transformer. It can't do that. I mean, they were rated to be able to run it, above rating. But unfortunately, the demands on the utility, the demand of power from those utilities, is aging the fleet even more.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. So there are products out there. We have some products designed to help with that, to take some of the principles of what we do in the large power transformers and extend it down to the distribution assets, because it's the distribution grid that's being stressed in the way that you're describing, trying to meet this residential electric vehicle charging demand. So, trying to bring that data back so they know where that's happening, because they have the AMI system data, so they know where the endpoint loading is, but they don't really understand how it's aggregating through the feeders. And they're trying to do maybe some state estimation and other load flow analysis to figure that out, but that isn't as accurate as what real-time monitoring of that's going to be. So, having simple devices that you can install that can provide that real-time data, so you know where you're exceeding the rating of your transformers and improve the planning around when they need to be replaced, is a valuable tool for utilities.
Okay, good. You guys are a global company, right?
Yes.
Do you see differences in where, let's just focus on the U.S. and Europe, obviously we can talk about, because Europe just has gone through this tremendous change as a result of the war. Now they're realizing we got to do something different. But just in terms of the different regions of the world, how are we doing, North America based, how are we doing compared to what other people are doing in the world? You see it around the world. How are we faring?
So one of the circumstances you were just describing about plug-in electric vehicle adoption, we have a good line of sight to Australia, and we do have a significant operation there, and they're ahead of us on that way. So the other thing that's interesting about the Australian market is they don't have the amount of AMI that we have in North America. So they have probably a little bit more of a blind spot, and so they have to deal with this in a different way than some of the options that exist in North America utilities. And so that's really where we're starting to see them use more distribution transformer monitoring, is simply because they're lacking some of the AMI data that you would lean on as a first tool to try and solve this. But then they're also seeing a much rapid, faster adoption of electric vehicles, so they have to respond. They're being forced to, because the demand is increasing faster. And that's a good leading indicator of what eventually we're going to run into in North America as we continue to see electric vehicles, coming in from the coast to the Midwest.
Yeah, and the coasts are going to all suffer first as a result of it, right? Looking ahead, I want you to fast forward 10 years. You're on an airplane with me. We've just had a nice conversation. And I say, Dan, where's the industry going to be 10 years from now? What would your answer be?
So I think what you're going to see is a better integration of data. I think that's the next big thing that utilities are struggling with. So we're starting to see people that, with their online condition-based monitoring, they're getting the data in. You have tools that are pretty good at executing automated like maintenance requests to go out and execute that maintenance. The disconnect that exists is we know the condition, we have the data coming in telling us the condition of the transformers that need help the most. We have tools that can automatically generate those maintenance requests to get people to those locations. We're missing that middle layer that can intelligently take all of that data and simplify it into maintenance requests, right? And so there are entities out there that are working on that. But that's a difficult integration problem that they're trying to solve, because then you also have offline data that you're trying to put in there, offline DGA testing. So there's other data inputs, you have other assets other than electrical assets that you're trying to maintain with the same kind of programs, poles, conductors. There's a lot of other factors that are contributing to that, but that's going to be the next big maturity phase, I think, in the way that utilities operate that'll allow them to be more efficient. In the meantime, though, some of these asset managers or health managers that we're dealing with, they need tools before that, right? So one of the things that we focus on is also making kind of productivity improvement tools so they can manage the fleet of monitors more efficiently before some of those other, 10-year-long visions start to become a reality. So there's definitely, I think, when we're talking about how the industry is moving, we have to have some products that are more short-term focused, and then there's going to be ones that are more long-term focused, and the combination of them, people that are able to adopt both strategies will be the ones that are most successful over the next 10 to 15 years.
And let's just hope the people making those decisions have enough confidence and understanding to make the right decisions. Lastly, dynamic ratings, where are you guys going to be in 10 years? What do you think your growth track looks like?
So I think one of the when we're talking about some of these data problems, right? We're going to start quickly running into big data problems. So you think about the number of power transformers that are out there. As they start to do high voltage circuit breakers, there's far more circuit breakers than there are power transformers. And then as you get into distribution, now you're dealing with other orders of magnitude more. So you start compiling and compounding all of this data. That's when some of these software tools are really going to start to show their value to utilities. Is how do you prioritize all this data that you're coming in, and how are you going to efficiently manage all this data for all the various stakeholders? Because not everyone needs the same thing out of that data. So it's not going to be a one tool serves all approach. It's not going to be successful. You're going to have software tools that are really designed, kind of like apps on your phone, right? You don't have one app that does everything. You're going to have different applications that are going to be better suited for, what those individuals need out of the data. And that's really, what we're going to be focused on as our long-term strategy is working with the people that we work with closely in these large programs that they're trying to execute. What do they really need to be successful? And hopefully we can deliver that for them.
Excellent. Dan, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it very much.
Great to talk to you again.
This has been an APC Technologies production, and we thank you for joining us. Our sponsors have been H2Scan and Distributech. And of course, the communities of APC Technologies, which is Transform Technology, Power Systems Technology, Green Energy Technology, and Women in Power Systems. So thank you.